Hello from the autumn pastures, everyone. We've moved out of the town finally, and we're set up with a herding family here, and I just wanted to give you an update on how we're living and where we're living. So we're in another ger, but it's like it could fit inside of the one that we were in. So these are the conditions we're living in. It's about maybe 10 feet across. There's Badrak, there's Amka, who even in the middle of the cold weather, in the middle of nowhere, is finding time to put makeup on.
Those are women.
And this thing, we've got 3 beds in it, and maybe room for 1 person to lie on the floor right there. And that's about it. The benefit to living in this thing, and it being so small, is that that stove really heats it up, and we don't have to complain about being cold in here, like ever. And we use almost no firewood. So this is what it looks like inside. We still got our electricity and our light that we use. We've got our smoke hole going out the top. We've got all of our stuff hanging on the walls, because if it wasn't hanging on the walls, it'd be all over the floor and we'd be tripping over it. So we have no chairs or anything, or we have chairs, but we're not using them because our beds are chairs and they're collapsible beds. The reason we're living in this thing and it's so small is because we're going to be migrating using oxen, and we only have 4 to use. So things have to be as compact and as light as possible to be able to do that. So we're going to be leaving in probably another 5 days onto the migration, and I'll show you where that starts right now. One of the other benefits of living here is the view you get every morning when you wake up. So when you come out of your door in the morning, you see this. So it snowed a lot, and it snowed kind of unseasonably in October. Usually this kind of weather doesn't come in until mid to late November, and typically the days have been, right now it's probably just above freezing, and it's October 23rd right now. It's just above freezing, but during the nights it'll go down to 5 to 10 below zero. And this is the family's, it's called a hasha, the fence that we're living in. And this is what a typical family's camp looks like. So there are 2 gers here, and we're living with a family that has 3 children, and they use this one. An older member of their family lives in this one, and they live in there with a few of their kids who are now on their way to school in the village center. And so everything's empty right now, and we're the only ones here. So I figured it'd be a good time to show the place. Every camp has storage sheds where people keep their stuff. So right now there's meat hanging in there, and there's some of the family stuff that's not coming on the migration with us. That's that stuff that you see in front of the door. Those are parts of another ger. Every family around here has satellite TV, so when you hear stories about Mongolian herders living a lifestyle that's centuries old, partially that's true. Yeah, this is what people would have been doing 500 years ago, but it doesn't mean people also aren't modern, and they have satellite TV. We were watching Family Guy and The Simpsons dubbed in Mongolian the other night, and everybody has solar panels and batteries just like we do, and that's how they get power. So I'll show you around where people keep their animals. Now the sheep and the cattle are out right now in the pasture, and if you look out there you see those trees in the distance, and you see the bushes, and that's where they're grazing the animals before we leave for the migration. The reason for that is that this is all covered in snow and it's really exposed. So if you go that way, you're out in the open, and things are really cold, really windy, and really harsh during the day. But if you go in that direction, there's less snow, and things are more sheltered. So you'll find patches of bare ground that the animals can graze on, and you also find shelter in the trees that people use. So every camp has something called a hasha. That's what this thing you're looking at right now is. And that's where you keep the sheep and the goats. And you can see the floor is covered with sheep and goat crap, and periodically you have to shovel that stuff out because it freezes and it gets really cold, and the animals could die that way. But it also has shelter from when the weather gets really cold, and this is what they would use in the autumn as opposed to the winter. The winter ones will be much more reinforced. There'll be a huge pile of hay in there that they already cut during the summer that they'll feed the weak animals during the winter, and there'll be much more cover on the roof of that shelter where the sheep and goats, especially the young ones or the pregnant ones, will get put. Every family also cuts firewood, so it's there's no shortage of firewood in this area because there's tons of forest. Like I said before, we're kind of right on the border between where the steppes of Asia end and the Siberian forests begin. So we're right on the line. If you go any further north, you're in Siberia. So it's covered in clouds right now, but the pass we're going to be migrating over is in that direction that you're looking right now, over this mountain range, directly to the east of us. And if you go any further north than that, you're in Russia. So we're about as far north as you can go in Mongolia without crossing the border. And every day you cut some firewood. The family has a chainsaw, so they cut up these chunks of wood and then you split them with an axe over here. So we've been doing that every morning, and I actually really like doing that. So this is the fence where you keep the sheep and goats, and now I'll show you the fence where you keep the cattle and the yaks. And the weather gets really cold and changes in like 20 minutes. It could be snowing, 20 minutes later it could be sunny. So it snowed during the night last night, probably about ½ an inch, but today has been a mix of sun and cloud. So every day you get these patches of sun that you see over here, and you can see the weather coming in right over here. There's one of the horses we're going to be using for the migration, and the migration route goes literally right next to us. So there's a road that cars and animals travel on right in front of us, and already 3 or 4 families have migrated up this way with cattle and yaks. And you can see on the fence right now there are a couple of saddles that people use to attach their gear onto the backs of the oxen. And this is one of the first days where the oxen have actually been let out of the fence. Normally, if you see those pieces of wood down there, they've been tethered through their noses, through the septum, to those pieces of wood, and they're not letting them graze or drink or anything like that for a couple of days to get them ready for the migration, so that they deliberately lose a little bit of weight and it's easier to attach those saddles to them. And an adult male ox can carry about 200 kilograms of gear. And we have 4, and the family is probably going to use between 8 and 10. So this is where the oxen are. It's much less sheltered than the sheep and goat pen is, but there's also a little shelter in the back where they would put baby cattle and baby yaks. And every day the women come out and milk the yaks. And yak milk is actually the best milk I've ever had in my life. I hate milk. And I had some yak milk yesterday, and it tastes like, I don't know, like hazelnut flavored coffee creamer. That's how I can describe it. It's really nutty and it has a lot of fat in it and everything. So this is the way we've been living for the last couple of days. That tiny little black gare is ours that you see in the distance. It's tiny, but it's really comfortable, fortunately, and it's really warm, maybe too warm. And this is what the Darhad Valley looks like at the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. So you can see the patches of forest in the distance, and then you have, if it wasn't covered with snow, this would be a mixture of grassland and rivers and things like that, and lakes. And to the west you can see through the clouds a little bit another range of mountains that surrounds us. So the reason this group of herders migrates so far is that if you stay in this area, you actually have a harder time during the winter than you would if you make this 120-kilometer migration into those mountains that you saw before. Because here it'll go down to, when we were looking at the weather data, around minus 57 Fahrenheit during the winter at the coldest. And there are herders who stay here during the winter on the flanks of those mountains over there. And they're the ones that have the hardest time during the winter, because that mountain range, which is called the Ulan Tiger Range, to the west of us, the cold and the weather just kind of seeps out of that and freezes everything. And there's a huge amount of rivers and lakes and streams in that direction that get ridiculously cold during the winter and really snowy. Where we're going is actually a little bit more temperate. It'll probably be, well, in the minus 40s Fahrenheit in January or February. And the reason why, this is one of the last groups of herders in the country that migrate this way. Everyone migrates. Everyone's nomadic in Mongolia to a greater or lesser extent, but most of them move by truck or by car because they have an easier route to get through. Now, there are herders who try to use the migration route that we're using by truck, and sometimes they succeed. This year has been so snowy that almost no one is trying to move that way by truck. So they do it by necessity because the terrain is really unpassable. And you cannot get back to this spot that we're in once December comes around. There's no way back over here unless you go a completely roundabout way that's about maybe 200 or 300 kilometers to get back to the spot that I'm standing on that's maybe 100 kilometers from where we're going to be settling for the winter. So next installment will be when we actually start the migration. This camera will be attached to my head so you don't have to see my ugly face, and you can see what it's like to migrate here. It'll be really cool. Catch you later.